Welcome to The Score, where we make sense of hiring trends, sort science from fiction, and find out what's new in talent acquisition from top experts in the field.
Hi, I'm Nicola Tatham. I'm the Chief IO Psychologist here at Sova. I've got 2 decades of experience designing fair, predictive and science-backed talent assessments. I'm here to cut through the noise and talk about what actually works in hiring.
And I'm Caroline Fry, Head of Product. I spend my time turning smart assessment ideas from Nick into tools that work. Scalable, inclusive, and ready for whatever AI throws at us next.
Each episode, we're joined by a guest to unpack a big question in hiring.
Because talent deserves better than guesswork.
And today, we're joined by Simon. Hi, Simon.
Hi, Beth.
Hi, good to have you here. So Simon is the Senior Talent Assessment Manager at Vodafone, where he manages the recruitment of thousands of candidates each year across contact centres, retail, early careers and tech. Simon's got over a decade of experience designing large-scale assessment programmes at John Lewis, Waitrose and now at Vodafone. So Simon's seen firsthand how hiring, skills, technology and candidate expectations have evolved. So thank you for being with us today, Simon.
Thanks for inviting me. I feel like I need to steal that intro for myself, actually. Like, great, better than I do.
What is the most surprising or memorable interview experience you've seen in your career, whether it made you laugh or cringe?
I feel like I could give you like half an hour worth of content just on that question.
We're listening.
Yeah, I won't include all the usual like brain teaser type questions. One that is definitely cringe, and I'm thinking to not name the organization, but an experience I heard about, let's say, is once a candidate rejected, a couple of candidates rejected a job offer for this role, and their feedback as to why they rejected the job offer was that, the organization's values didn't align with what they were expecting from the organization. So when the people responsible probed further, like, what do you mean by that? I don't quite understand. The feedback was that the people doing the hiring at the time, it was the business areas, let's say, first birthday, so it'd been open for a year, and they thought it would be appropriate to make all of the candidates sing happy birthday through the shop as part of the area as part of the process. So definitely cringe, yeah, but memorable, I suppose.
Yeah, certainly memorable.
Hope it hasn't marred happy birthday for them forevermore.
Yeah. So I can totally get the rationale for rejecting that job offer.
Feeding that back to the teams must have been fun as well.
Yeah. You're just like, what do I do with that information? That's such a bad, like at what point did you think like this is a real appropriate thing for us to do with these candidates? And at no point, nothing in your mind stopped you from doing that.
I think that's one of the winners so far. We will actually at the end of the year have to rank order and do a top 10 of answers, but I think that's definitely in the top 3, the ones that we've heard.
That's got to be in the top 3, sure. Yeah, I was thinking of lots of bad ones, but that was up there.
Yeah, you could probably write a book on them by the sounds of it, but we'll come back to that. It's the next career. So going back to the very beginning of your career, and I didn't know this about you, but before moving into talent acquisition, you worked in store where you managed retail teams. So how would you say that hands-on experience has shaped the way that you think about assessments today, especially when it comes to driving adoption amongst hiring managers who perhaps don't live and breathe TA science in the way that you might do every day?
Kind of reflecting on that, I think the first point I would make is I think managers are very time poor in those environments. So if I go back to my time there, you're very much thinking, I've got 20 pages of delivery, I've got these tasks to do throughout the day. So your mind is typically on, those are the things I need to do by X point of the day and my team needs to do. So when you're taking time out to go, I need to interview people, I need to do this role play with them, or whatever it is you might be doing in store, that feels like a distraction quite often from what you really need to do on that day, and it adds to your day. So I think there's an element for me there about how do you embed the process, make it feel slick, make it feel valuable, but they're going, okay, actually I'm seeing enough of this person to know if they're right for my role or not. I think the other bit that I think applies, and I wouldn't say that, I've learned this a little bit, I think, from from those areas, but also more broadly, we've got some great teams in the business here that do that. Just thinking about it being a great product, but actually if you've got a great product that managers can relate to in terms of like, oh, I can really see the value of how I'm understanding this person, their skills, what they're going to bring to the role, people are going to want to use it. And I think quite often in HR, we kind of take this perception of going like, well, we've decided this is a process and this is a standard that everybody needs to follow. And we take a bit of a stick approach sometimes, but actually translating that, I think more from a product perspective, like actually, if you've got a great product, people are going to want to use it, right? I think that's one for me. And then the other bit is managers still having ownership of the process from an adoption point of view as well, particularly that kind of final gatekeeping or that final step, TA, we might do all the slick bits up front to go, we want to get you 3 candidates that are all great and you could hire any of them, but you need to make the decision on which one. And the reason I was reflecting on like the ownership piece is I think a lot of the tech and a lot of what we're seeing now is almost like taking some of that ownership away from managers, and then you feel less responsible for your hire. Whereas actually, I think if you've made that decision, you feel the sense of ownership to go, okay, I've hired this person. I'm also responsible for making sure they've got the right upskilling and they have a right onboarding journey, rather than going, that team gave us that person, this because their assessment tool doesn't work, and you feel less ownership of that decision. So that'd be my third point, really.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Thank
you.
Because
I think sometimes we start flipping it, I suppose, from a psychologist point of view, we start going, oh, let's talk about the validity, the reliability, the fair piece. But actually, if I'm in that environment, I start going, well, actually, that's the bread and butter we should be thinking about, so other people don't have to think about it.
Yeah.
And actually, their critique should be, oh, yeah, I can see how this helps me identify this person for a retail store or this person for a contact center or whatever the role is.
Yeah. So as the psychologists and as the HR teams, you have to. We don't need to be bothering them with a reliability of 0.35 or 0.3. They just need to know that this thing works, and it talks to them in their language in a way that they can harness and utilize with their own recruits. Yeah.
It's the same when we go into their environment, right? If we go into a retail store, actually, we just want to know, have you got the stuff I need in stock? Can I pick it up? Maybe is it in date? That's helpful. And can I get through the till quickly? Like all of the background stuff that shop are doing actually does it, and there's loads of it shouldn't matter to us. And I think it's the same from a assessment point of view.
Yeah, it's a useful way to flip it, actually, to see it from a different perspective. Thank you. I think Caroline's going to ask you the next question.
I am probably unsurprisingly, since it is everywhere generally, but also everywhere in hiring. You mentioned AI and you mentioned about the decision making, and feeling ownership over what those teams in store are doing, for example. And we know AI is certainly becoming pretty ubiquitous in hiring, but what's your biggest red flag when you see tech creeping too far into the decision making process?
Biggest red flag? Oh, that's I probably have multiple, probably the two that come to my mind the most. One is that kind of lack of explainability. So I think particularly when we're going like high stakes environments like talent acquisition or talent decision making in terms of promotion and progressions, it's that lack of explainability or black box side of things. And I think that's probably been one of my frustrations, I think, as an assessment industry, is other parts of HR are much quicker and other industries and other functions are much quicker at adopting AI technology and implementing it. But obviously sometimes it's less high stakes. So, you've got really great coaching practice tools that are AI simulations. We're not, although they can be risky as well, they're not making decisions that say about people or simulations in terms of contact center type conversations and things like that. So definitely that lack of explainability, I think, is one. And you see it quite a lot where companies are going, yeah, we can definitely do that from a talent acquisition perspective. And you're going, I'm not quite sure how the scoring is going to work. You're not really explaining that particularly well for me. The second one, which I think maybe and I'd be interested to hear kind of your reflections on this, probably predates AI a little bit. And maybe this is like a occupational psychologist thing that we do, is almost outsourcing that manager judgment to an algorithm or a machine, us going, well, actually, they've got score X on this assessment or that interview, and almost going like, oh, we have to distill that person down to a score to make a fair decision, which I obviously totally get and understand and agree with in principle. But there's so much more to it than we kind of disregard in terms of like, well, actually, how do you think that person will do in your team? How, what skills will they bring? What would the conflicts be? How will you work with them? And all of that kind of stuff. It may be harder to turn into a number, not impossible, but harder to turn into a number. We've tried to say almost don't think about those things because that's bias and you can't turn it into a score. But actually, I think there's something to me about going, but actually acknowledge where those feelings and what you're thinking are coming from and take that into consideration as well.
And I guess it's just trying to create some objectivity around that, isn't it? It's trying to avoid the unconscious biases that slip in. I think they'll do well because they grew up in the same area that I grew up in, as opposed to think they'll fit in well because I've seen their team stars report, for example, and I can see, the elements that they're more likely to bring to this retail unit will fit really well with the way that the team operates. So it's sort of combining that more objective data with the line manager's thought processes, but in a way that is always fair and objective and not biased, which is really difficult. It is really difficult. We're all human.
Yeah, exactly. And just really, like you say, acknowledging where that comes from. I take sales roles always as an example because I think that for a sales role, likability is such an important thing, like building rapport really quickly, being likable, building that trust. And actually, I know we can say, did they build rapport quickly? Did they build trust and score it? But actually, that's a really subjective thing because me, you and Caroline could all sit on a interview panel interviewing someone and I might go, oh, yeah, I really like that person. They were great. I could see them selling loads of stuff. And Caroline might go, they're terrible. I don't know who you were listening to, Simon, but they really grated on me. So although we might have both turned it into a data point, is it objective?
Yeah, absolutely fair enough. I guess, sorry, Caroline, go on.
Sorry, Nick. I was just going to say, yeah, there's a lot that you touched on there, Simon. I agree. I think the scalability issue that technology is created and then AI is sort of exacerbated on top means that, if you said, although there's individual issues with bias as well, if you said the idea was that everybody would have human interaction, be humanly assessed, even at the scale that, I know you guys work to when you have your requisitions going through, then maybe there is a future world in which AI can really get down to that kind of, processing of all of those softer skills, the likability, the culture fit. But I think, working with it right now, the way that we do, there's quite a way to go there from what we've seen, what we've experienced, what we're trying to build. I'd also say, going back to something you said right at the start about, we're all a bit exhausted with AI and the lack of transparency. I think I've seen a lot of AI first HR tech startups coming that don't have the discipline that you guys as Oxytes have in assessment. And that's where it's falling down because you have to have both of those things still. And your comment about the assessment industry being slower to take assessment in HR tech specifically, I agree. It's completely because you're making decisions and the Oxytes in the industry are completely committed to doing it right, which means it takes longer. You can't have a quick win with an AI. You have to go through all those checks and balances. AI isn't a shortcut. It has to also operate in all the same principles that I know Nick applies to everything that we see come out in terms of content for us. So I think as a sort of vendor, it's our responsibility to make it clear that we've done the work to build trustworthy assessments that use AI. And that's not happening everywhere. And I wondered if you've seen a tool or approach, you don't have to name any names, that's made you think, no, that's not what good hiring looks like.
Seen a lot of those. I'd probably just reflect. I can go there. I think what I was reflecting on actually as you were talking was what I found fascinating probably in the past 18 months to 2 years compared to previously was I think we're all figuring out what it means for our industry and our areas sort of at the same time. Actually, I know obviously having conversations with you and your teams and others that actually we are kind of figuring out, how does assessment work in the world of AI? What's the right approach to your point around Nick's work around fairness and how can we be innovative whilst also doing the right thing? But that's one of the opportunities, right? It's a risk, but it's also a real great opportunity for the industry as well, I think. Yeah, as you're asking about something, but what have I seen that's maybe triggered me, let's say. I think there's a lot of what I've seen generally in the industry around, going, hey, you can use that for talent acquisition, but to the point around how would the scoring, how is the fairness check, like that's just clearly not there in a lot of suppliers, which I think we'll just start to see being used more with teams that don't understand the rigor behind it. So unfortunately, I think we will see that. Something that I went through a while back. Well, I suppose one of the bits I love about my role is you always have people reaching out and, hey, can we do a product demo for you? Do you want to try this too? And I'm like, yeah, great, because I'm like inherently really like curious to see what's out there and what people are doing. And it was just like a standard psychometric, but used from like, I would say the design process was probably using more like the more clinical approach, let's say, from a psychologist perspective. And it was very much questions along the lines of like, how many siblings did you have? What was the relationship with your siblings? What was the relationship with your parents? And very like quite deep personal childhood stuff. And I was thinking, okay, like depending on what's going on in my family at that moment in time or previously, I was like, I'm feeling quite triggered by this assessment of just from completing it. I have no idea now. I can't remember, like in terms of, it might have been able to predict things, right? I don't know if it could or couldn't. There's probably a logic to can some of those things predict how you're going to behave in the future. And then the report output was like beautiful. It's like this beautiful report. It looked great. I was like, if you just gave me the report, I'd be like, this looks wonderful. But actually the process of getting there, but I suppose that's the reason I raised that one, because I was like, actually there were certain bits I was like, oh yeah, if we gave this to our candidates, this is a really pretty report, looks really good, looks really on brand. But the whole approach to getting there, I found like really triggering. And a few of my colleagues that did the same tool said exactly the same thing. They were like, I found this really intrusive. It was collecting.
I thought we'd moved on from those style of questions decades ago. So, some of the original personality tests, none of the questions that spring into mind right now, but they were very sort of personal, not necessarily work related. And it felt like we'd moved on from that. But yeah, it'd be interesting to see where that goes. So thank you. I'm going to shift gear a little bit now. Everyone's talking about AI. Everyone's also talking about skills. And, we're seeing more and more data. And, as the pace of change in the world of work is so quick, the shelf life of a skill keeps shrinking. So if, let's say, every 2 years our definition or our sort of library of key skills becomes outdated, how do you future-proof what you measure?
How do we future-proof the skills that we measure? I think that's an interesting one, because I think we are seeing more and more, I suppose, from a skills, particularly from a hard skills perspective, that like actually, I don't even think they're changing like over years like they were a few years ago. I think it's like every few months you're kind of seeing, what you actually mean by that. And you hear it obviously when you think a little bit about the, your open AIs and Anthropics and that, actually, when they're talking about racing to get something out, they're like, we need to be a month before them, otherwise we're too late. So kind of the pace of things is moving along quite a lot more quickly than I think it used to. I think we still have to measure skills though. So if I'm reflecting not just for our organization, but more broadly, I always kind of think like actually there's three lenses to look at things. There's kind of the behaviors that are whatever your organization's behaviors are that are critical to success there. I think there's the skills that are relevant to the role specifically that might be hard or might be soft skills, and depending on where someone is at in their career kind of defines what level of proficiency you want to measure that at. And then I think the final bit for us is looking at like the person's like potential or their learning agility, however you want to define that, in terms of that ability to pick things up quickly, learn, apply it in different scenarios. I don't buy in. I feel like I've just got a critique of the assessment industry now. Like, it's a theme throughout. Well, I've got another critique of assessment. It's I don't necessarily buy into like what you hear a lot, I suppose, is going like, don't assess skills, actually assess their potential, like their curiosity, their willingness to learn. And we call them whatever we call them in the industry, different things in different companies. Yes, I agree with that to some extent, that might be the right approach with graduates, with early careers people, or if people are reskilling or switching roles, let's say mid-career. But I think fundamentally that's maybe something we've done as psychologists because measuring skills feels too difficult.
Yeah, I think our ethos, having sort of spent time thinking this, is that they don't need to be mutually exclusive. I think I know every minute counts when it comes to assessments and candidate experience, but there's a way of looking at, can you deliver what we need now in terms of the soft skills that we need you to bring to the role? And then obviously if there are some hard skills that are a bit more specific, then we can, not necessarily from our library, but from some of the hard skills test providers, then also looking at that alongside what you've just described with that, particularly in early careers roles. You want that person that's going to be willing to roll their sleeves up and learn something new, move into a different team, pick up some new software and run with it. So you can't test everything across everybody. So if you can test what do I need to function well in the job right now, and then am I going to get those people with the potential to learn as well? I think there's probably a holistic way that we can try and achieve that. And I don't think they necessarily need to be mutually exclusive, but
absolutely. And I put the telco hat on, where half of our employees are in digital and IT and those types of roles where there are quite a lot of hard skills for the different functions within there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But I guess there are also lots of those hard skills probably change. The technologies that you use regularly changing as well. So you're looking for people that have got that nous to go and learn those new ones.
Yeah. And I would say also, again, last few years, from my perspective and my role, it's become a little bit easier. That I think assessment providers at least are becoming a bit more like, okay, cool, I understand, but actually this is our niche in terms of what we assess, and we might be really focused on skills, or we might be really focused on more the behavioral sides and the potential side of things. And I think actually as an industry that helps us create better products and better services for our kind of customers in terms of managers, recruiters, candidates as well.
Yeah, having those options, absolutely.
Okay. I've got one more serious question for you, Simon. So picking up on something that I think you both touched on there, around, candidate experience and the length of candidate experience. You lead high volume hiring where every extra minute in the process can add up fast. So how do you provide a great candidate experience without making the process shallow?
Good question. Okay.
Eternal question.
Yeah. So I think a couple of things. I kind of think typically, what does a hiring process take for a typical, let's say, frontline role, where maybe it's fairly standardized? It might take a week if it's a company that's super efficient, maybe up to a month, let's say, as an end-to-end journey. So my mind kind of goes a little bit to an extra 20 minutes or 30 minutes in the process. How painful is that really as a step? I kind of actually think the main barrier, let's say, in terms of that really slick process comes in when we've got poor integrations and poor setups in terms of how those things get set up and how those things get triggered. And probably I'm thinking, Caroline, your team have probably heard enough of me and probably sick of me going, that's 4 clicks for a recruiter to do that. It needs to be 1 click, because actually 4 clicks means they're not going to set it up and they're going to complain to me about the process. That's not a Vodafone specific
no, not
thing.
at all. That's the click mantra follows through every work we do as well, because at
exactly.
scale it adds up, right?
Yeah.
You can't underestimate that.
Exactly that. I kind of think if you're having to do training demos of how to set something up, it'd be like if Amazon said to us, we'll give you some training how you can find the buy button. When you find a thing, it'd be like, this is a terrible process. So that's kind of one bit, I think, in terms of your tech stack, let's say. How can you make it super efficient to actually...
It's not the specifics of the assessment time, it's all of the movement transitions between those, how the communication happens, any automation that you can add in.
And I think quite often we conflate those two things, and we kind of go the assessment takes 20 minutes and therefore the interview process is long because you've given me a structured guide, and actually I used to just have a conversation with them. So I think there's those bits about slickness of process and myth busting. I also, probably one of the other bits for me, kind of reflecting on that, is I also find And probably something I've learned probably over the last few years is seeing recruitment and assessment journeys in terms of deciding who we're going to hire as much a branding exercise in bringing the company and the role to life as it is an assessment exercise. And you have to take the time to do that, right? To let the candidate know this is typically what a day looks like. This is actually what our culture's about and what you're going to experience. And if you can do that through the process, it kind of gives you two things. It allows people to select out if they're like, actually, this really isn't for me. Now you've explained the role. And actually, if I was just worried about, or we were just worried about speed and efficiency, we wouldn't be doing those things. And all you end up doing is going, great, you've been enrolled a month, 2 months, 3 months, and you go, oh, I'm going to leave because actually I didn't realize that's what the role was going to be like.
Yeah, some really good. Yeah, exactly. Like, so not taking the time to do that then just causes inefficiencies later on the line.
Yeah, and we found that particularly with our like frontline contact center retail roles, like really bringing those roles to life and the types of interactions you're going to have is just like super beneficial for both candidates and for managers.
So I guess when you compare it to people used to go into the store, armed with their CV and do, have an interview, they would literally live the experience and know what it felt like to work in the store. And we don't have that sort of luxury in inverted commas nowadays. So it's about trying to bring it to life for candidates so that they know what they're getting themselves into. Basically, they know it's going to be right for them. We've given you the grilling that we were going to give you now. So now we're going to move on to a little game that we call science or fiction. So what we do is we're going to throw a few statements your way. Some are grounded in science and others not so much. So your job is to tell us which is which from your perspective, and just to help sort of set the record straight on some of these statements. So I'll start with the first one, which is the best predictor of future performance is past performance. Is that science or fiction in your view?
I would say fiction.
Fiction.
I think typically we'd be saying like, reasoning ability is
more to it than that.
Predictor.
Yeah,
even though I've definitely heard that loads of times and I've almost definitely said it to people as well, but we'll ignore that.
Okay, ready for the next one? Candidates trust AI decisions more than human ones as long as they're explained clearly.
I think the as long as it's explained clearly makes it true. Otherwise, I would have said false.
Yeah, it's probably emerging, isn't it, as a research area just yet. It'll be interesting to see where we get to on that. The next one is making assessments shorter always improves candidate experience.
Definitely fiction.
I thought you were going to say that, right? I think we were going to guess that. Okay, next one for me. Soft skills are becoming more important than technical ones.
I would say, I don't know if there's any research to back that up, but my view would be true to science.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which is kind of aligned to what we were talking about earlier.
Do you actually know the answers, by the way? Have you got like...
I think they're somewhat subjective.
Yeah, I was thinking, depends what journal we're reading or what.
Obviously, you've got every single one right so far, Simon, of course.
Yeah.
Great. I think the last one on the soft skills. Yeah, I think we're just talking about it more and more, aren't we? Now we're saying like actually you're using AI to maybe do some of that harder stuff, but actually how you interact, how you influence, how you learn and be curious, I think just feels.
I think that's the ethos behind this, really. And we've talked about this on the podcast before as well, in that technology is doing a lot of that heavy lifting work for us. So being able to do a calculation, being detail conscious, a lot of that work is done for us now. So it really is about lifting up to, like you've just said, the influence and skills, do you get on with people? Can you take people, with you? Do you listen to others? Can you demonstrate empathy? I think they're the things that are coming to the fore because the robots are doing a lot of the other stuff for us. So it's those human capabilities that really
That's just
matter.
made me realise I appreciate ChatGPT for making sure I don't have to proofread my own work. When you're talking about something else, I've forgotten about that. Terrible at proofreading my own work.
Do you remember those days? Back in the olden days?
Keep remembering to thank the robots, though, for when they take over. I'm always careful to do that.
Yeah, we'll sort the Christmas cards out from us all. I think the final one is hiring managers don't need to understand assessment science to use it well.
I think true, I would say. I think they have to understand the process and understand the approach. But I don't think if I started explaining, I don't know, Crumbacks Alpha to a hiring manager, I'd be like,
we sort of dipped into that earlier. That's your job. to make sure that it has got a good Cronbach's alpha so that they know that they can just use it. And I guess it's not necessarily about understanding assessment science per se, it's understanding the logic for using the assessment and why it's important it's that buy-in, I guess. And when it gets to things like those final interviews, understanding the concepts of unconscious bias and, why I use behaviorally anchored rating scales and all of that fun stuff. So it's not, it's sort of, there's an element of the science, I guess, that it's like the top end of it as opposed to the deep dive into the heavy psychometrics and the like.
Yeah, I suppose it goes back to that product design. It's just built in by design of the process.
I don't need to know how an iPhone works to use it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it's the same thing, actually. I can pick it up, I can look at it and go, cool, this makes sense. I understand the logic to it and the value of it without being an expert.
Yeah, I guess, well, like a firework, you don't need to know how they work, but you need to understand the rules on how you deploy them and how you use them so that you're using them safely. So. Well, thank you, Simon. This has been really insightful. So thank you for your time and obviously the expertise that you bring to the podcast as well. If there is one thing that you would like people to remember from this episode, what would that be?
I feel like I've mentioned like product design loads of times. So I think I will go with, using that as a basis for anything, I suppose, talent decision wise that you're working on. If you're making a great product that people want to use, actually, you don't need to worry too much about the kind of adoption and forcing it too much because people will want to use it.
Thanks for hanging out with us on The Score. If you enjoyed this deep dive into candidate experience, fairness, and making assessment rollouts actually work, don't miss what's coming next. New episodes drop every 2 weeks on YouTube, Spotify, or wherever you get your talent assessment insight. Thank you.